Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. My name is Randall. This is the McClures. We react, review, we make fun of, we laugh at stuff over here. Links are in the description if you want to help support the channel. You can always shop McClures.com if you don't want to donate to 41-year-old bearded men. Did have a birthday, so now we're 41, which is why I missed yesterday's stream. So if you tuned in yesterday to catch the stream and I bailed on you, my bad. I ate far too much barbecue and I was bloated and I needed a nap and we didn't stream. So yeah, I was birthday boy yesterday. But thinking back, I probably should stream on my birthday because maybe people would be more inclined to give me a tip or a donation out of sympathy since it's my birthday. But I also figured nobody really gives a fuck because I'm a dude and nobody cares. And nobody cares whatsoever. Um, but today's show, we're going to get into who is Vivek Ramaswamy. Is that how you say it? Ramaswamy. Ramaswamy. Um, I have seen clips of this guy. I have seen a couple comments of his. I've seen some Instagrams he's been on, but we haven't really checked him out. So I'm curious. I am curious. The stuff that I have seen on him, I like the guy. I like what he's saying. I like what he's saying so far. So I'd like to dive into it today and try to figure out what this guy's about. So I figure we check out probably not all of, but portions of a few interviews that he did with a couple different people. See how he kind of acts in front of different type of folks. We might check out a speech or something that he did. Maybe we'll just Wikipedia him and, go through the history, see what is happening. If you guys have anything specific you would like to check out regarding Vivek, let me know. If you guys seen anything interesting and you want to, let me know. Definitely let me know. In the meantime, where are you guys watching from? Who are you voting for? What are your political leanings? Are you a lefty who just can't bring themselves to vote for Biden again because you know he's a complete degenerate piece of shit? Okay, I'm seeing interview with Vivek actually 3 months ago. So this might be interesting. There's a part 1 and a part 2. How do you guys feel about listening things in fast forward? You know, like 1.5 or double speed. Some people like it, some people don't. We would be able to get through much more content that way. Jose Suarez is in the house. What's good, bro? What's good? Welcome to the live. All right, Pirate doesn't mind speeding it up a little bit. He's not a da-da-da. His ears work. So, yeah, we're going to bump it up a little bit because, you know, in order to find out what somebody's up to, you kind of got to check out a bunch of content. But we don't want to spend 7 hours watching this guy's content. So, let's bump it up a little bit. So, that's my favorite thing about Spotify is you can listen to a Joe Rogan podcast 3 hours, 3.5 hours, but you can do 3 or 3.5 speed over there. So you get a 3-hour podcast in an hour. I mean, that's sweet. Topic today is Vivek Ramaswamy, currently running against Donald Trump in the primary for the Republicans, and we don't know much about him. So we're going to dig into it. We're going to dig into it, find out what he's about. We're going to start off with this Candace Owens interview, see what kind of background information she goes into on him. And then maybe after this one, we'll dig into some of that background information if we're more curious about it. If it's pretty self-explanatory and we don't give a shit, then maybe we just move on. But let's start with Candace Owens. I know that Officer Tatum interviewed this guy. I know that Tucker Carlson interviewed him. So I think Charlie Kirk interviewed him. So I'd like to, obviously we can't watch all 4 of those interviews, but I'd like to hit a few of them, at least maybe segments, and kind of get a feel for how this guy responds in different types of scenarios, different types of situations. But yeah, shout out to everybody on Twitch and Facebook tapping in, as well as the YouTube and the Rumble. But to all of you, rumble.com/McClures is the best place to be. If at any point during the live we get copyrighted for anything, we drop everybody else, but Rumble is where it's at. So Rumble, we will always be there. So if you're on YouTube or wherever and I just randomly go bye-bye, head over to rumble.com/McClures. We will still be live streaming, chilling, kicking it over there in land of free speech land. All right, let's get into this. Now, somebody told me on this screen that I was too small. And I mean, that was, granted, that was for a music reaction. So maybe they were just saying for the music reaction they wanted to see my face. I think for this type of video, we'll keep it big because I'm going to react on the big head screen after we listen. So, yeah. So let's get into this. Vivek Ramaswamy. Ramaswamy. However you say it. Who are you? Let's find out. Candace, tell us about him.
Team Trump or Team DeSantis? That at least is the false dichotomy of our choices for presidential candidates in 2024. I'm very pleased to bring to you guys a discussion that I'm going to have with Vivek Ramaswamy. I've been paying attention to his campaign. He should be discussed more, and I'm just interested to hear what he has to say. That's what's coming up today on Candace Owens.
Or I could show you none of it.
All right, guys, Vivek Ramaswamy. I have been talking to you guys about him on the show. I find him to be the most interesting candidate in the field for a lot of reasons. What he is saying is just good sense, and it also allows us to have a conversation about somebody other than Trump and DeSantis. For some reason, people think they're the only 2 people in the race. He's got a lot of great ideas, and I think you're probably all having the same questions I have. Where did he come from? Why is he suddenly running out of nowhere? Is this just an ego thing? Is he just trying to get his name out there? What is this really about? Vivek, welcome to the show.
It's good to see you, Candace. How are you?
I'm good, and I'm interested. So I want to start from the very beginning. First off, just introducing who you are. Where do you come from? What state are you from? Where were you born? Where did you go to school?
Yeah, sure thing. Yes, I was born in Cincinnati, Ohio. I'm talking to you from my home base in Columbus today, which is where our family lives. But my parents were immigrants from India. They came over in the late 1970s and early 1980s, my dad and my mom. They didn't have a lot of money. We didn't grow up particularly rich, but it was a education-focused family, as you might expect of first-generation Indian immigrants. And ended up growing up in a pretty poor public school, actually, through about 8th grade. But then they actually ended up deciding to switch me to a private school so that we could actually focus on academics. So I went to St. X High School in Cincinnati. I still am actually on the board of that high school to this day. And that was a big part of where actually my moral education, I would say, began and shaped a lot of my views on the educational system. But anyway, St. X in Cincinnati had a big impact on my upbringing. And then I ended up going to Harvard for college. Thought I was going to be a scientist. I was this nerdy guy in the lab for most of college. So that was me. But when I graduated, I decided that, I don't know, the time horizon of just spending around, working on 10-year projects in a lab was a little bit not my speed. And so I ended up getting into the world of biotech investing in New York City. I joined this hedge fund in the fall of 2007, right before the '08 financial crisis. That actually shaped a lot of my views on capitalism to this day. It was a heck of an experience in a good way from a learning perspective as a 22-year-old guy. I did that for 7 years. I had this itch about 3 years in. I had been so science-centric that I decided that I wanted to study law and political philosophy. I had never really done that. So I spent 3 years in law school at Yale from 2010 to 2013. They let me keep my job as an investor. And so those ended up being 3 productive years. Met my wife. She was my next door neighbor. She was in med school at the time. Anyway, long story short is after all of that happened, I founded a biotech company. I decided I was sick of the pharma industry. It's actually a really deeply broken industry. We could have a whole hour about that. It's an industry that behaves like the government because it's a monopoly industry. It's regulated by the FDA. I wasn't thinking about this from a governmental perspective at the time, but the good news is, as an entrepreneur, that creates a lot of opportunity when you have an industry that behaves like a government. And so anyway, I started a biotech company that was designed to challenge big pharma and basically focus on developing these drugs that for bureaucratic reasons, they just decided weren't the drugs they actually wanted to develop.
All right, now one thing I will say right off the bat is he's very well spoken. As far as it doesn't seem like he is reading a script or going off of notes. He's not, he didn't study talking points before the interview. That's what I've noticed from a couple of the other clips that I've seen from him. He talks like a real human who is just giving his opinion. Obviously, an incredibly smart guy and very driven to be so well accomplished at such a young age. But this is not uncommon, like you said, for first year or first generation Americans from immigrant family. They push very hard for their people to get into the fray of America and make it happen for themselves, because it's possible. It's funny that Americans teach their kids and their kids think that it's not possible. But all the immigrants come in here knowing that it is. And they make it happen for their kids. So you got to respect that. So yeah, so far very well spoken. Impressive background. And we'll go from there. All right, we got a follow, folks. We appreciate that. Ice the Goat for 20. Ice the Goat. Okay. I like your username, my guy.
Develop. And it ended up being the backbone of building a multi-billion-dollar company that I built as CEO for 7 years. 5 medicines I worked on are approved drugs for patients today. The one I'm personally most proud of is a drug for prostate cancer that I can definitely say would not exist if it weren't for the steps that I took in my years as CEO. But I stepped down from my job as a CEO. I think you and I talked about this on your documentary for a very different reason. It was in the wake of the George Floyd death and the Black Lives Matter protests across this country that there was a demand for me to make a statement as the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar biotech company in favor of Black Lives Matter. I refused to do it. And that set up a 6-month, I would say journey is what I'll call it. I described it in Woke Inc., but a 6-month journey that resulted in advisors to my company stepping down, very prominent people. And I decided that, look, nobody's forcing me to step down. It's my company. I was the founder. I was the CEO. So I didn't have a boss per se. But it was clear that if I was going to continue speaking my mind as a citizen, not using the company to do it, but just staying honest to my true beliefs, that was going to have a negative impact on my company. And I decided to, speak freely as a citizen rather than through the filter of.
Are you mad?
Okay.
Yes, I am. I'm mad about inflation. I'm mad about how the government is spending.
Corporate self-interest. It's one of the best decisions I've made. I've been liberated ever since then. And I've been speaking freely across the country. I wrote 3 books. 2 of them are out. The 3rd one's coming out this year. Been to a majority of states across this country, speaking about the perils of the woke religion, speaking about the perils of so-called stakeholder capitalism, using companies to advance political values. I've had a front row seat to seeing the toxic impact of that, both on capitalism and I would just say on our society more broadly. But the last piece of this.
Now, to me, real quick, when he says, shout out to him as a CEO for standing up to the woke mob. And shout out to his employees for not getting thrown under the bus by their CEO taking a stand to their detriment. So he did walk away. But he said he walked away in order to keep speaking his mind. So did he walk away in order to pursue a political future? Do we think he had it in his mind at that time that he already wanted to go into politics? And why president as the first go? I mean, that's quite the jump into politics. Go for the, I want a heavyweight title fight, my first fight. Okay.
Candace, that led me to actually take the step of running for president is even though I was trying to solve these problems through the market, I actually ended up starting another company called Strive to compete with BlackRock and actually use shareholder power to tell companies to go back to focusing on their products and services for profit instead of pushing these ESG values, these environmental and social agendas. And Strive's been incredibly successful in a short amount of time too. As much as I was focused on the top-down problem, the state working with private companies to get their agendas done through the back door that they couldn't get done through the front door, as much as all of that was important, wrote books about it, addressed market solutions. If I was being really honest about it, that trick only works if you have a culture, a populace in this country that's willing to buy up what they're selling. And I wasn't going to solve that through writing books or just the market alone or pointing out the problem. And that's when, my wife and I, we had a really deep discussion about this not that long ago, around Christmas break at the end of last year. saying that, you know what, I think that we're going to have a national cultural revival to actually address that bottom-up problem. And that's what led me to this most recent step of the journey in running for president. And the goal wasn't just to run for the sake of running. I think the way we drive that cultural change is actually in the way that Reagan drove a national revival in 1980, by actually succeeding and governing with a cultural vision for national identity in America that I think we're missing. And that's what brought me to the doorstep of this presidential journey.
Vivek, so you are the son of immigrants, is that correct? Like you just said?
Exactly.
And yet, are you arguing with me that you somehow were able to make it in life as a brown person without having to play the victim Olympics? I mean, how did you do it? I've learned via the public school education system that if you are black or a brown person, you are suffering and you are disadvantaged. It doesn't sound like that has been your life. It's interesting that there is this hyper focus on black people that look like me, and yet they do sort of like to ignore the conversation about why it is that actually the most successful group in America is not white Americans, it's Asian Americans. So what do you think is the driver of your success? You're supposed to be a victim. You are brown. Why don't you have this perspective that, well,
It's the parents' focus on education for their kids.
it's you?
Well, it's a shame, Candace, because I actually even see this in my extended family, in the Asian American community, Indian American community now. The next generation, so people who are in my kids' generation, right, my nieces, nephews' generation, they're now taught to see themselves as victims again, because that's how you get into college. Right? You have to have a sob story. I got into, I got into the top elite universities by succeeding academically without apologizing for it. Now the next generation, we see those kids that actually are spinning up these victimhood tales to see themselves as persons of color, to sort of say that we, the Indian Americans, are more like the black community than like somebody else because we need to use victimhood as a currency. That worries me. That's part of what sent me on the journey I'm on right now. But for me, my dad had this saying growing up, right? Everybody runs into hardship. Okay, so I told you what my upbringing was a little bit like, but it was like very academically focused. Family was everything. Academic success was everything, and that was really different. So the public school I went through, like I think it was majority black. If not, it was close. It was a school district that was built through a patchwork of annexations, including some poorer communities. I'm really grateful for the experience. It was really different than the Catholic school experience I had when I was the lone Hindu kid in the Catholic school too. But I will say that, academic achievement wasn't something that was prized in these other families. In fact, many of these kids, largely black kids, came from single parent households. Big difference. Was I privileged? Yes, I was privileged. Not monetarily, not financially, but privileged to have a family that had two parents in the household.
You had a dad
that made a sacrifice for their kids. And there was the two things that my dad used to say. One is, you can make a sacrifice if you know what you're sacrificing for. Right? So you enter a marriage, okay, you're giving something up. Well, so be it. It's worth sacrificing for. You want to have kids. You're giving something up. So be it. Our parents were invested. And my brother and I both went on to found companies. My brother's a really successful entrepreneur in his own right. That came from having a strong family foundation. But the other thing they taught me was, even more than my brother, I was kind of like the nerdy, kid with glasses, skinny kid with glasses and a funny last name, and a dad who had a funny accent, growing up in Southwest Ohio. And his, it was his corny little mantra, but it was actually true, and I value it much more now. He says, if you're going to stand out, you might as well be outstanding. And so for me, achievement was kind of my ticket to get ahead. And
okay, that's corny. It's bumper sticker-ish, but it's true. It is true.
Even when I think about like my policy planks in this presidential race, for example, right, one of the things I said on day one is that I'm pledging to end affirmative action in America. Race-based affirmative action has been a cancer on our national soul.
Well, it's racist. It's
racist.
It's racist.
It's outright racist. It's racist in every direction. It's a form of racism against white people and Asian people. That's the most obvious piece of it. But it is also fueling and fostering anti-black racism in our country. I have not met a black colleague or classmate in my life who wasn't capable inherently of accomplishing everything I have in my life. Now, the circumstances they grow up in or the culture that they're taught to grow up in, that's a different story. But it is racist to tell these kids that you can't achieve what I achieved without the government or some system giving you a hand up. That is psychological slavery. Actually, I'll talk about slavery in our moment. But I talk about these issues. I bring that up not to get into some policy discussion, but because these issues are deeply personal to me. Right? The idea of achievement as a way to get ahead in America, meritocracy as a way to get ahead in America, that's deeply personal to me. I wouldn't have achieved what I had if this wasn't a country that prized merit. And my dad, I spoke about my dad earlier. He's actually kind of a lefty. He won't use that word, but he's definitely, a left-leaning guy. But if there's one issue that lights him up more than anything else, it's actually this issue of anti-meritocratic policies. Like if he sees that Virginia school getting rid of national merit scholarships, where it's kind of like Kamala Harris fakely said on stage, I was that little kid, right? In my case. And that, I think it's the fact that it's that deeply personal to me that allows me to touch this issue that's supposed to be an untouchable, affirmative action. Lyndon Johnson actually set affirmative action into motion by an executive order. This is something that a U.S. president can actually address.
Well, actually, Vivek, I think what allows you to approach it publicly is you're not white. That's what allows you to approach it, because pretty sure white people for a long time have been saying affirmative action's pretty freaking racist. So I think that's the key. You're a brown guy talking about it, so maybe they'll listen. Maybe.
If it was started by executive order, and I can tell you all about that, you can end it by executive order. Not one president, not even one presidential candidate in U.S. history since then has actually pledged to end affirmative action. And the reason why is they're dancing around the issue. And for them, maybe it's like in the policy rankings of what their policy briefing people say, they'd say that's a political battle we don't want to fight. For me, it's just deeply personal, is I don't care what the politics of it are. It's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And so in some sense, I think it's because of what this country gave me and the foundation that my parents gave me as well that lead me to a lot of the policy views that I'm embracing pretty unapologetically, because you know what, it's not about the politics of it, it's about the truth of it. Yeah. And that was a little bit about what my upbringing was like that led me to some of my views.
Well, first, I do want to say also for our listeners that something else to know about affirmative action is that it actually harms Black people that purportedly benefit from it. And Thomas Sowell did a great job examining this. He was an adjunct professor. I want to say it was Cornell. I could be wrong. And he recognized that everybody that was on academic probation, all of the Black kids that were there were on academic probation. And he went to go investigate why that was. And he realized that when you mismatch people, he's like, these people were the cream of the crop. If you had put them out of school based on what they actually knew and didn't force them into schools that were actually above their academic caliber, they would have been at the top of the class. But instead, because they were swimming with people that were more academically capable, they were at the bottom of the class. And so it actually harms people by mismatching them into universities. And so it's very important. Clarence Thomas has written extensively about that problem as well. And I'm also a person that believes that affirmative action should be abolished. Now, it's interesting that you point out people have not talked about this issue. You are correct. Yep. Even on the right, I have so many criticisms of the right, and I'm going to get into those because I want to hear more of your policy answers to it. But even on the right, there's still this fear of being called racist, and it is really harming us. I mean, Trump had it as well. I've not seen a Republican president, Republican candidate that isn't still fearful of this smear, of this libel, of people claiming that you're racist, even if everything that you do is not. It's why they do things. It's why Trump pursued criminal justice reform to say I did more for Black Americans. And so I want to also ask you, how would you, aside from abandoning policies like this via executive order, how would you address things like CRT initiatives, things that are coming up, in my view, due to the Department of Education quite literally trying to make students focus on emotionally engineering these people to eventually, in my view, become dependent on the government because you're not qualified just because you say I'm Black and you cry into the streets. How would you correct the issues with the education system?
So I'm glad you brought up the Department of Education, Candace, because that tells me you get something that most people don't get in this country, which is that's actually the invisible hand, or should we call it the invisible fist, behind the rise of the critical race theory movement in local schools across the country. I applaud parents who have shown up at school board meetings to replace bad school board members. That's an important step forward. But here's the invisible part: is many.
All right, so here's the important question. Does he call to ban the Department of Education altogether? Or is he going to talk about reform? We're not down with reforms. The Department of Education has got to go. It's crap. It's crap.
Many of those school boards are actually responding to the economic incentives created by the U.S. Department of Education. So the U.S. Department of Education spends about $80+ billion. I think it's about $83 to $85 billion per year in the form of grants, in the form of subsidies, but there are strings attached. So if you're a local school, you get that if and only if you adopt certain agendas espoused by the U.S. Department of Education. What does that include? It includes the same.
Busy women are making money from home without the headaches of drop shipping, affiliate marketing.
Kind of indoctrination that you see through other parts of our U.S. government, like the U.S. military, et cetera. Same thing with respect to the U.S. Department of Education, critical race theory, gender ideology. These are actually attached as strings to getting money. So people respond economically to incentives because the school board members say, well, if we're going to get that kind of money and that kind of financial aid, well, then this is just a cost of doing business. Now, some of this is bottom up too, but people forget the top down part. Now, my view as a leader here is I've built businesses. Yes, I've been a constitutional scholar, Yale law educated, all that, but I actually bring a private sector perspective to interpreting Article 2 of the Constitution, which says that if you're the chief executive, if you're the president of the United States, and you can't fire somebody who works for you, or for that matter, tens of thousands of people who work for you, that means that they don't work for you. It means that you work for them because you're accountable for what they do without having any authority to change it. And that's not what Article 2 of the Constitution says. So I take a strong view of executive authority when it comes to downsizing, that these civil service protections, these are congressional statutes from a long time ago that sort of said, if you're a civil servant, you can't be fired. I think those are unconstitutional if that's actually what a president of the United States believes is the right way to affect the laws of the country. So I'm, again, the first person here to say that I will shut down the U.S. Department of Education. It's not an agency that lends itself to reform. You have tens of thousands of people showing up to work, carrying out a mandate they should have never had in the first place. You can't reform that. I love Betsy DeVos. I think that President Trump did a great job putting her in charge of the Department of Education. But when an agency fundamentally should not have existed in the first place, you're never going to solve the cancer that it creates on our national soul by just incrementally tinkering around the edges or even putting the right fit.
Okay, so you got to give him like what is that, 2 points on the board, or maybe that's a 3-pointer or something. You got to give him some points for that one. He did want to do it. Now, this interview was 3 months ago. I'm not sure when Trump first said that he wanted to abolish it altogether. And if that's something that Trump stole from him, I'm with it. I'm with it because regardless who gets in, we need to get rid of the Department of Education and the ATF and the 7th floor of the FBI and Homeland Security. There's a lot of things that we need to get rid of.
Figurehead on top. You have to shut the thing down. And so actually, I think I said this on day one of launching the campaign. I'm going to shut down administrative agencies. I take a strong view of Article 2 of the Constitution. I think the people who we elect to run the government, such as the President of the United States, should be the ones who actually run the government, not a permanent managerial bureaucracy. And so, you know what? Once we shut down the Department of Education, by the way, take that $80 billion. You say school choice is underfunded in certain parts of the country. rain that money from on high, that makes that problem look small by comparison, and you'll still have a lot of money to spare, that $80 billion. It's about $1.6 billion per state in this union. And then you solve some of the other problems too, Candace, because turns out, here's a general principle, is if you have an agency or bureaucracy that's cancerous in one thing, like, for example, the critical race and gender ideology movement in our schools, and it is, turns out it's probably causing other problems too. And it turns out with the Department of Education, they absolutely are. You wonder why, most people watching this, right, pick up the phone, try to call a plumber or a welder or a carpenter. Turns out that's kind of hard to find in America, and that's actually one of the drivers of inflation. Well, why is that? One of the reasons is, you guessed it, the Department of Education will subsidize a 4-year gender studies major in California, but without any similar kind of program for 2-year study programs for welders or carpenters or mechanics or plumbers or builders. So you get what you pay for, right? You're paying for the one thing. Guess what you got? You got a bunch of 4-year gender studies majors from California who don't really know how to be useful members of the workforce, but you have a workforce shortage because we subsidize the system. So you subsidize CRT, you get CRT. You subsidize one form of education over another, you get an imbalance in your labor force. But as a president, and this is where like a big part of the way I look at this is, I don't criticize what President Trump did. I'm just taking what he began in this country to the next level without apology, without fear of being called racist or Christian nationalist or white nationalist or whatever. That would be a tough sell, I think. But
they're going to do it anyways.
You're not a white guy, bro.
I don't really care.
You're not a white guy.
Than I do, but you've had more experience in this public light than I have. But I'm ready for that. I don't care. I'm 37 years old. I'm a millennial. There's a lot of things that are just different, and also I could care less at the end of the day. I'm not even in this I would rather speak truth at every step of the way and lose this election badly than to somehow find a snakes and ladder. And I see others in this race who are much more politically calculating, savvy types that are thinking about the way they're supposed to play a given issue. I'm not cut from that cloth. I'm not playing that game of snakes and ladders. We're just going to speak truth at every step of the way. Our bet is that's a successful electoral strategy. We'll find out. Maybe it is, maybe it's not. I think it will be. But even if it's not, I think really winning is actually about speaking truth and being willing to act on those convictions. And if I do win this thing, we're going to take what President Trump set into motion.
I do like
really
this guy.
take that to the next level. Not
I
just
do
tinkering
like
around
him.
the edges, not just
Not gonna
exposing
lie.
the problem of this permanent administrative state, as he did in many cases, right? He exposed the swamp. He exposed the deep state. If you actually want to do something about it, you have to be willing to gut the thing, take a sledgehammer to it and shut it down. And the Department of Education is a perfect example of even these local uprisings we're seeing, as good as those are.
All right, there's Department of Education. Let's jump forward a little bit into a new topic.
COVID policy had about as much to do with COVID as the climate cult in the United States.
Is told in school how they're all going to die. I came from Generation Global Warming. There was global cooling before it. There was acid rain. I mean, it goes on and on. But it does seem that as of late, they're really pressing a thumb on this. And I can only surmise as to why. Obviously, we can all think we have the right to think critically about what's going on. But I was very curious when it came to the Afghanistan pullout, the sloppy pullout, immediately getting out of there, and then suddenly China's there shaking hands with the Taliban. And one thing that people don't know about energy, it seems like they no carbon emissions, and they're perfectly fine with batteries. And Afghanistan has this tremendous lithium resource. And I wonder if they're all long in the energy. If all the politicians have gone long, and they're essentially manufacturing that demand that is going to eventually need to create these batteries. Again, we can't be sure, but I definitely think that there is something more sinister going on because it defies sense. Why wouldn't you want your nation, if we're able to be energy independent? But why would you be fighting against this so hard? Why are you having children skipping school, so concerned if the planet's going to end? What is your end goal? I
think sometimes you can look abroad, see it with clarity, and then come back here. So take what Xi Jinping's zero COVID policy was all about. We had a version of that in this country, right? COVIDism was sort of the predecessor to the modern surge of climatism. Part of the reason you're seeing the surge of climatism now, Candace, is that it fills the moral vacuum that was previously filled by COVIDism. It's like a deeper religious sense. You're like the Israelites lost in the desert. Why do they say they want to bend the knee to Pharaoh? It's because they're lost. And so, Pharaoh might be COVIDism today, it's climatism tomorrow, or it was COVIDism yesterday and it's climatism today. But, Xi Jinping plays this game with his own people too, right? So China's zero COVID policy had about as much to do with COVID as the climate cult in the United States actually has to do with the climate, which is to say nothing at all. Right. Now, there are deep-seated financial interests at work here, but why was Xi Jinping doing that over there? It was for dominion. It was for control. He was taking over an unprecedented third term as leader of the CCP. He broke the chain of succession. You're supposed to have 2 terms. Well, last October, he took over his 3rd term. Is it any accident that he had zero COVID in place, total lockdown of the entire population, right as he was taking over that 3rd term? Well, that's exactly what's happening with the climate cult here in the United States. It's just an excuse to exercise dominion and control over a populace that otherwise wouldn't have accepted dominion and control through the front door unless you pick.
Is that actually the case, though, with Xi Jinping? Because I was under the impression he was already voted in as president for life. So if they already passed the president for life thing, don't get me wrong, I don't put it past the commies for doing it, for sure. But I don't feel that is accurate. I don't think that was right.
Get those insecurities, because it's like what I told you at the beginning. We have this culture that's lost, a populace that's buying up these victimhood narratives. Why? Because we're so hungry for purpose and meaning at a time when faith and patriotism and hard work and family have disappeared. Then we have a black hole in our vacuum of our heart. And so, you don't have.
Hey, fellow lobsters, if you've ever read 12 Rules for Life, have you ever wondered
hey,
how to talk
lobsters.
to your kids about these ideas?
Believe in Christ, that's okay. You can believe in climate instead.
Right.
That then preys on the insecurities of the population. But what does it do? What does it do is it's the final mechanism of driving. And I would say this is not even about the United States. It's about a transnational movement. The World Economic Forum is a big part of this, et cetera, to have transnational dominion and control over the way that everyday people live their lives. And the climate has nothing to do with it. And you want a good example of understanding why? I think you probably know this, Candace. Many people may not. As recently as 50 years ago, so that's not a long time in the scale of human history, okay, in the 1970s, there was climate alarmism in the United States. Widespread climate alarmism.
Oh, yeah.
That we were going to enter an ice age.
Global
So
cooling.
literally there's a cover of Time magazine, I think Newsweek magazine, that used to actually be a big deal back then. It was a magazine in circulation, cover of how we're entering the next ice age. Some of the very people like Paul Ehrlich and others who are the leading scientists.
Climate change is the one, like, political football they've been throwing and tossing around for decades. And all they do is change the playbook. Like they were saying, it used to be we were going to freeze. And then we were going to heat up too much. And then they couldn't decide. So it wasn't cooling or warming. It was just changing. And that's where we're at now. It's just changing. And they're like, oh, the CO2. Humans have to stop CO2. I read something the other day. CO2 is like 0.004 of the atmosphere. And we contribute like 3% of the 0.004 as man-made. So we're going to spend $50 trillion, wreck all Western economies across the entire globe. For what? So we can reduce carbon? Carbon in the air is lower than it used to be. The planet's greener the more carbon we get. I don't see the problem. I think we should be pro-carbon. We're pro-green, right? Plant a tree. Well, you need the fucking carbon for the tree to keep going.
Pushing that theory are now literally the leading scientists cited by the New York Times on a given day about how we're now entering existential global warming just 50 years later for the same reason, carbon emissions. And so part of this is it's dominion and control, but part of this is also a sense of apologism, self-flogging. It's like wearing a hair shirt. It's like literally flogging yourself for success itself, right? What's at the heart of this climate movement is actually a belief in the anti-growth movement itself. The idea that economic growth and prosperity and our ability to live a modern lifestyle is itself a sort of sin, especially when the rest of the world was not, in their view, given the opportunity to live that same lifestyle. And so that's actually what explains it. So it's not just totally hypocrisy. There's more than that. When they say that they're fine quietly with shifting carbon production, carbon emissions from the US to places like China, part of what's going on is it's actually that apologist agenda of letting the rest of the world catch up to our lifestyle by self-flogging ourselves for our own success. That's why they're against nuclear energy.
Yeah,
because nuclear
energy, option that we
and
have.
most abundant. So that may actually allow the U.S. to unlock its own GDP growth. But that's actually part of the problem, in their view, is the U.S. having disproportionate GDP growth again, because that's not fair. Because the rest of the world didn't get a chance to catch up and penalize the West for its sins. And so what it's really about is this agenda of global equity. But if you tell most people that in America, they're not going to accept that. So you have to tell them it's about some existential calamity that means their children's kids are not going to have a planet left to inhabit, so they shouldn't have kids instead. That's actually how you get them, is through this catastrophism and alarmism. But it only works insofar as we have a population that doesn't believe in God and doesn't believe in country anymore. And so that's why just pointing out this problem top down, it's important. We can take a step forward doing that. You do great work on this every day. I've written books about this for a reason. I've traveled the country. I started Strive to try to compete with BlackRock. But as much as those things can move the ball forward, it's not going to work unless we have a bottom-up cultural revival that restores that sense of self-confidence in America. Like, that's the real vaccine we need. Right. The vaccine of self-confidence that immunizes us against these other cultural cancers. And that's part of what gives me a sense of purpose in this new journey I'm on as well.
And you're so right to point to sort of the spiritual vacuum, because it is people, no matter what, you are going to pursue some sort of a faith. I think it's natural. We're inclined to do that biologically. There's a ton of evidence to support that. And I think that what they've done is that they've depleted us of wanting to pursue God. They used to teach the Bible, especially something that they ended. It used to teach the Bible as an academic book in school. You remove that, you have a bunch of people that are lost, and they're pursuing that somewhere else. And they're sort of saying, well, then I'm going to worship climate. I'm going to
skip
whole weekend with Trump. He's talking to see how maybe talking to his biggest donors of like, what should I say? Because his biggest donors hate Trump, right? That's why they're getting behind him, because they're so done with Trump. Right. And so he doesn't want to upset them by not saying the right thing. And I felt that with him and was unable to explain.
Who has first personal bone deep convictions. And that means that, like, if it's a 999 tax plan or a plan to reform Social Security, fine, you can have the idea guy over here, the visionary, and then the implementer here in the White House. There may be times in history where that works. This isn't one of those moments. We're in a 1776 moment. We need people with conviction. And honestly, if I felt like that existed in the form of a newcomer like DeSantis or somebody else, I wouldn't be in this race. I don't need to be doing this. But part of the reason why is I think we need somebody who's courageous enough for courage to become contagious in America.
Let me back it up a little bit, because I was hoping for the question, why are you running against Trump? Why don't you think Trump's the best man for the job?
I thought this was wrong. Why did I speak up about it? It's because those of us, myself included, who are running against President Trump have the most credibility, the strongest standing to actually condemn the politicized prosecution of our opponent. It would be convenient if President Trump were the top poller right now. We're out of the race. I'm sure it would be convenient for Ron DeSantis. It would be more convenient for people like me. That's what gives us credibility, though, to call out and hopefully help shape the right outcome for the country. And I pray for the country now that this guy comes to his senses. We'll see. That's pending as we speak, that Alvin Bragg potentially backs off of this politicized persecution through prosecution. Where was Ron DeSantis? Same place he was with respect to the Silicon Valley bailout. Silent. Until a couple days later, when what do you see? A poll tested, okay, I know condemning woke is good for my base. Now let me just say Soros as many times as I can and hopefully throw that candy at the base without actually addressing the issue head on. It's a politicized prosecution. It's wrong. Yes, it would be convenient if Donald Trump were out of the race politically, but that doesn't matter. This isn't about politics. It's about principle and country. And to join me in condemning and calling as a fellow American on a misguided district attorney to say, are you actually doing the right thing for the justice system or the country? And if you're not, drop this. That's what I think we need more of in this country. If you're going to sit across the table from Xi Jinping, you can't be afraid of NBC News. You can't be afraid of your own base. You can't be afraid of your donors. And I think that's a big part of a problem in the Republican Party is you have a lot of politicians who are afraid of their donors. And as much as I give him credit for what he did as a governor and being a foot soldier in the battle against wokeness, I think what we really need in the presidency is somebody who has first personal, bone-deep convictions. And that means that, like, if it's a 999 tax plan or a plan to reform Social Security, fine, you can have the idea guy over here, the visionary, and then the implementer here in the White House. There may be times in history where that works. This isn't one of those moments. We're in a 1776 moment. We need people with conviction. And honestly, if I felt like that existed in the form of a newcomer like DeSantis or somebody else, I wouldn't be in this race. I don't need to be doing this. But part of the reason why is I think we need somebody who's courageous enough for courage to become contagious in America. And that's not going to be done by a follower. I think that's going to be done by a leader and likely an outsider, which is why I'm in this.
You know what? I love that you said that because I haven't been able to communicate. I've essentially said on the show, I don't have an issue with Ron DeSantis. I'm just a gut player, and my gut instincts about him is that he's very practiced and he's very rehearsed. And that's all I've said. I haven't really given a reason. I haven't been able to eloquently state what you have just so brilliantly stated right there about Ron DeSantis. I love him as a governor. I said if I lived in Florida, I'd be voting for Ron DeSantis. I think he's done a good job as a governor, but I don't trust him on the world stage. I said I don't trust him to be America first on policies. And I do feel that he is beholden to his political consultants. He's beholden, more importantly, to the donor class. He does. And I feel like that whole weekend with Trump, he's talking to see how maybe talking to his biggest donors of like, what should I say? Because his biggest donors hate Trump, right? That's why they're getting behind him because they're so done with Trump. Right. And so he doesn't want to upset them by not saying the right thing. And I felt that with him and was unable to explain that to my listeners. And I'm just so grateful that I asked you that question because that's exactly how I feel instinctively. And I think that you are reading that correctly. Vivek, we are out of time. I just want to say, if I liked you before, I liked you even more now. I mean, there's just, you're saying everything that I feel. And I think that you are speaking directly to the people who maybe feel a little bit of Trump fatigue. But we also feel very committed to the fact that we are so grateful for Trump and all that he's done, what he was an outsider, everything that he's saying, we're standing behind him with this prosecution. And so I just want to leave it to you. Speaking to those people who are just sort of feeling a little politically homeless right now, are terrified of the Democrats and what they've been able to do in a few short years. But you're not the person that's at the forefront of the race. What would you like to say to those individuals?
So look, I'm effectively in this race now what Trump was when he came down the escalator in 2015. Okay, that's where I was. I'm an outsider. Nobody's, the mainstream media is purposefully ignoring me just like they did Trump initially. So be it. Here's my advice to you. The self-serving thing would be to say, hey, here's all the reasons why I think I'm going to be a great president. That's why I'm in this race. Forget about that for now. This year, 2023, nobody's casting any primary votes. Okay, just not the way the system works. 2023, this should be the year about defining the what and the why. What do we stand for, and why do we stand for it? In the Republican Party, we skip that step sometimes. We'll obsess about Ron McDaniel or somebody else, or Kevin McCarthy or somebody else, or Donald Trump or somebody else. Forget about that. Okay, define what do we stand for, why do we stand for it? And then next year, you get to pick who's going to be the best person to actually get that done. And the whole strategy of my campaign, I'm open book here, okay? The whole strategy of this campaign is we are aiming to be, I think, if I may say so, we in 1 month into this already are leading the way in defining that agenda. And our bet is that next year, the voters are going to reward who led the way this year. But that's a question for next year. This year, just join me in focusing on defining what it is we stand for as conservatives, as Republicans, as Americans. And if you're being really honest, we don't have a good answer to that question right now. I'm in this race to deliver a clear answer.
Okay. Well, that was part one. We can end it there. We don't need to hear the rest of his wrap-up speech. But I like this guy. I do like the guy. I didn't hear the question, why specifically do you think Trump can't do it? And you think that would be the first question that anybody asks him, why you're running against Trump? So I don't know if we skipped over it, but we watched almost the first half without any skips at all. So do we want to jump into part 2 of Candace's interview, or should we jump into a different interview of his, something maybe more recent? I'm interested to hear the Tucker interview. And looks like Vivek posted it on his page. It's only 26 minutes. The actual clip here is 36. This one's 43. I'm always curious the editing. Let's go with the 43 one from Blaze. Or actually, let's watch from Vivek's channel, because I probably won't get a copyright for that.
What if you could do SEO smarter and faster?
No, it's 10 minutes shorter. We can't do that one.
I've been there before, yeah.
You got a producer on the stage. Right. Put it on the wrong way. You have to put the batteries in the correct way. Okay. Is that on? I love it. So Vivek is the only person running, I think, who hasn't practiced politics for a living.
Yeah, I'm not practicing.
All right, so before this one starts, we just watched Candace Owens interview Vivek back in the day, so to speak, a few months ago when he first came out. Like he said, when he first came down the escalator, nobody knew who he was. So that was kind of his first response. He's been going around doing speeches, doing interviews and whatnot for 3 months. Let's see if he has altered any of his positions, changed any of his opinions, or if he's sticking to the exact same script. I'm curious to see what has changed. And Tucker is a great interviewer. So, without being under the thumb of a cable news company now, he might be even a better interviewer. Let's check it out.
Practitioner. No, you're not. You're not a practitioner. So it's interesting. So let me start with a very quick overview. You've been traveling around the country for the past, 3 months, 4 months?
Yeah, 4 months.
How do you think the country's doing?
I think the country is doing poorly, is the answer. I think that we have a void in our country. I'm the first millennial ever to run for US president as a Republican. And I see people my age in particular across this country who are not doing well because we're starved for purpose and meaning. There are people who are looking to be part of something bigger than ourselves, and yet we've lost the things that used to ground us. Faith, patriotism, hard work, family. These things are gone. And so we're lost in the wilderness. And then we latch on to whatever the other side serves up for us. We could wokeism, transgenderism, climatism, whatever it is. These are symptoms, drug addiction, depression, suicide, you name it. These are symptoms of a deeper void of purpose and meaning in our country. But Tucker, I think the good news in that is I think our country's not doing well, but I think that this is also our opportunity as a movement to level up and fill that void, that vacuum, with our own vision. Individual, family, nation, God. When I talk to young people about this, they're more interested in that than they are in race, gender, sexuality, and climate. And so now we got to start running to something as Americans, and if we do, I'm confident that our country will be doing well again. That's where I'm at.
Is it my imagination, or are people who weren't raised in traditional religious households, who haven't spent a lot of time thinking about theology, all of a sudden talking about God a lot? Do you notice that?
I do notice that, actually, and I think this is a good sign because there's an old expression, right? If there's a hole the size of God in your heart, and God does not fill it, something else will instead. That's what's happened in the last decade in our country. Something else, some secular religion has filled that void. But it hasn't really satisfied our moral hunger, right? So that's that effect is fading, and I think people are hungry to turn back to the real thing. The conversation's coming up, but they say it with a kind of prudishness,
yes.
Right? God is a 4-letter word. It's sort of a thing you have to tiptoe around. And I think that right now family's the same way. The nuclear family makes some people uncomfortable when I say it, but actually this is the best known form of governance to mankind. And so if we start talking more about, hey, that's what we're running to. That's actually what we stand for. Yes, we are one nation. I'm a citizen of this nation, not some nebulous global citizen somewhere else. That it is one nation under God. Yes, it is a nation that is stronger when we ground ourselves in the unit of the family. Then I notice something happens, especially for younger people across the country, Tucker, is they're more open to that message than they thought, but they need someone to serve it up to them. And I think I'm the first non-politician, but I'm also a younger person in this race. I don't have a ton of experience running governments before. But I think in reaching younger people, that's something I feel called to do in this race, and it's why we're traveling college campuses across this country, and I am optimistic about what I see.
Well, since you are a younger person and spend time with them, we saw yesterday that a group of reservists has been called up to Europe, apparently, to prepare for war with Russia. Of people in the age cohort who might plausibly be called up to do that, what's the response?
I think there is no basis for us to send our young men and women, our sons and daughters, people my age or any age, to go defend somebody else's border halfway around the world, when we should be using our own military to secure our own border in this country. And I will not apologize for that. We have to put the interests of this country first. And one of the things that does frustrate me, Tucker, is that this is one issue where...
My bad, folks. I'm sitting here talking to myself. I appreciate you, Anton, for letting me know I'm a retard. Shout out to that. But he got hype on that one, didn't he? He got hype on that one. He was super stoked. He was super stoked on that. I forgot what else I was going to say now. Oh, well.
I so love many of the other people who are running for this nomination for president. I think most of us in the entire field I speak for are in this for the right reasons. We are people who care about our country and want to deliver our country to a better place. But on this issue, nearly our entire field is indistinguishable in practice from where Biden is on this, which is in an undefined, ill-defined way pouring more money into a war that I think is destined to become Vietnam or Iraq all over again. And if you don't learn from the lessons of the past, you're going to be making the same mistakes on an even larger scale going forward. We have to end this war. We can end this war and start prioritizing the interests of actual U.S. citizens here at home.
So I think, judging by the response you just got, I think a chunk of, I don't know what percentage, but a lot of Republican primary voters agree with you. Not all, but a lot. I don't think any Republican donors agree with you.
I think that's accurate. And I've lost, to be really honest with you, I've lost many large donors or prospective donors over this issue. And it puzzles me, because I think the tempting thing to say is to have some conspiratorial explanation that they have money at stake in government contractors, Raytheon, or whatever. I don't think that's true, actually. I think there's something else going on in the psychology of an establishment in both the Republican Party and the Democrat Party that is reluctant to the idea that we somehow can't be the ones fighting the war that's the popular war of the day, the politically correct war. I think there's no such thing as a politically correct war. And so what I ask is, how are we actually going to end this conflict in a way that advances U.S. interests? And the thing that puzzles me, Tucker, is nobody in either party is talking about this right now. The Russia-China alliance is the single greatest threat that the U.S. actually faces today. And we are pushing Russia closer into China's arms by actually continuing to arm Ukraine. So what I've said is that I would negotiate a deal that ends the Ukraine war, frees the current lines of control. Yes, that means giving part of the Donbas region to Russia. I would make a hard commitment that NATO never admits Ukraine to NATO. And those seem like unspeakable words in the, certainly Republican donor class. But we get something greater in return, which is that Putin, in that case, would have to exit his military partnership with China and remove nuclear weapons from Kaliningrad, which border Poland, and get the Russian military out of Cuba and Venezuela and the West. And this is a deal that Putin should do because he ends up winning. He gets things that he doesn't have today. But it secures American interests, too. And I do think, in a weird way, it does take an outsider to get that job done. Because if you want someone to fix a...
That is a good plan. That is a good plan. That's basically Trump's plan, what he says he'll be able to do within 24 hours. I believe Trump will be able to do that. I think Trump is capable of calling Putin and be like, look, we're done now. We're done. You had your little fun. I'm back in the White House. It's over. It's over, my guy. I don't know. I don't know if I feel that Vivek will be able to do that. I don't know. It's only the second time I've listened to him. I don't know. I don't know. Will leaders of other countries be able to respect this guy? That's the question. Will he demand respect from the other nations? I don't know if he can. I don't know if he's got that gravitas, however you say it.
Problem. You don't turn over the keys to somebody who actually broke the thing in the first place. If you want to fix it, maybe have somebody who didn't break it in the first place, and that's part of why I'm in this race as an outsider.
Okay, well, since you're getting radical now, let's go through a list of all the other things you're not allowed to say. So you've just said, you're not attacking anybody, but this doesn't seem to be helping us. In fact, it seems to be creating an alliance that we can't beat, and really, it's pretty scary. So let's go through this. Another thing you can't say is that maybe January 6th, while appalling on one level, maybe it was not an insurrection.
So let me talk about, I haven't talked about this much in the campaign. I'll be very honest with you. You want to know what caused January 6th? There's such a temptation to say that there's one man whose name is unspeakable.
No, first of all, it's QAnon.
It's QAnon. You want to know what caused January 6th? Is pervasive censorship in this country in the lead up to January 6th. You tell people in this country they cannot speak. That is when they scream. You tell people they cannot scream. That is when they tear things down. And so the reality is, we were told that you could not question where the virus came from when we all knew it came from a lab in Wuhan, which now they admit. We were told that you could not send a private message to someone on the eve of an election that Hunter Biden's laptop story was actually a true story worth considering before an election. You were systematically suppressed. So think about this. You told you had to be locked down, had to take a vaccine that was mandated and forced down your throat, stay locked down in your home while Antifa and BLM roam and burn the streets of this country. So that's the lead up of one full year of telling people you have to shut up, sit down, and do as you're told. And then you tell them, okay, there's an election where you didn't get the information that you needed, such as the Hunter Biden laptop story being real and suppressed. That's what caused January 6th, is a cycle of censorship in this country. And until we look ourselves in the mirror and admit truth on that, we will not move forward as a country. And I think that's the real cause. We're not, and I'm sorry to say this, Tucker, but I think until we reckon with that reality.
I don't know. That's a cop-out answer to me. That's a cop-out answer to me. I don't know what the rules are on YouTube these days as far as talking about the perfect election of 2020. Supposedly they changed the rules, but we've been monetized less than a week, so let's not piss off the commie overlords at YouTube. But anybody that honestly believes that Joe Biden, who didn't campaign, who stayed in his basement the whole time, who's clearly racist, who's clearly pedo-ish, has some creepy ass vibes. If anybody really believes that he got 81 million votes, 15 million more votes than Obama, I'm sorry. You know, we got a bridge to sell you, or whatever the reference to stupid people is, because it's not feasible, people. It's not feasible. And they're like, well, so many people hated Trump that they came out against him. But Trump got like, I actually forget this number. I want to say it was at least 10 million more votes, 12 million. I think it was 12 million more votes the second time than he got the first time. So if everybody was so pissed off and wanted him out, how did he keep all the votes that he had before and get 12 million more? Like, it doesn't make sense. And oh, looks like Blaze is going to copyright me for this one. That's unfortunate. Should we switch it up to a different interview? Or do you folks on YouTube want to jump over to rumble.com so we can keep going with this? That's the problem with YouTube these days, is they don't let you react to anything live. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. So, I think I want to finish this with Tucker, so we're gonna keep watching this. Anybody that's on YouTube, head over to rumble.com/McClures. It's better than YouTube. Quality's better, picture's better. The chat needs a little work, honestly. But yeah. Rumble.com/McClures. Head over there if you want to be able to finish this up. Oh, wow. I should have invested in Trump's Trump stock today. Had a nice jump. Just got the notation. Well, YouTube, we're out. We love you. We appreciate you tapping in. Rumble.com/McClures to finish up the stream. Let's go. All right, we're finished up on YouTube.
I worry
Let's
that is
continue.
the beginning of it's a friendly parley compared to what's to come, unless we step up and speak truth, restore integrity, and actually lead us to who we are as a people, rather than sweeping the truth under the rug.
How can you, just as a philosophical question, a lot of the people who are pushing censorship, in fact, I would say almost all of them, in both parties, particularly the Democratic Party, claim they're doing so in order to protect democracy. But how can you have a democracy with censorship?
So you want to know the best measure of the health of a democracy? We're a constitutional republic, but I'll use lowercase d democracy as a filling, right? Couldn't resist.
People always applaud at that. I love that.
It's just the truth, though, right?
No, it's true. But the civics majors love it.
That's great. But the best measure of the health of our American democracy, our constitutional republic, is the percentage of people who feel free to say what they actually think in public. That's the metric. It's not the number of ballots cast every November. That's just going through the motions. It is not some other metric of what the media says on a given day. It's the percentage of people who will say in public what they're willing to say behind closed doors. There's no doubt we're doing poorly. The culture is censorious enough. Now, if you say the government on top of that is using social media companies to do through the back door what government could not censor through the front door under the Constitution, that creates the real threat to lowercase d democracy. My litmus test is if Vladimir Putin was doing it and we would call it a threat to democracy, it's a threat to democracy when we do it on this side of the Atlantic as well. Okay, that's a good way of not pointing the finger at somebody else, but looking at ourselves in the mirror and asking ourselves who we really are. And this is personal for me. I'm a Republican candidate for US president. It feels still new to say that. Not a politician by nature, but I bring that fact up. You know, now, as a very recently, certainly polling reasonably well in the recent polls. And I bring that up because against that backdrop, Microsoft owned LinkedIn, censored my social media account. They locked my account, said I can't get in to make statements that are factually grounded statements about climate change, about Biden's relationship with China, about the ESG movement's perpetuation of the climate cult in this country, all grounded in fact, saying that it violates their policies for hate speech misinformation. And I'm not making this one up. They said violence in the email. And so in my case, look, I was able to publicize that. They then claimed it was an error, restored the account, typical operating procedure. But it's that culture of censorship in our country that I think we also, I'm trying to do my part, where I was in Ottumwa, Eastern Iowa, earlier this week. Smaller event than this, but we're on the stage talking. Somebody walks in. She's screaming at the top of her lungs. At first I thought, usually if they're screaming, sometimes they're in favor of what you're saying. So I said, thank you. But I realized that actually, no, she...
When she bit you?
She came... So she was out of control, okay?
Yeah, I know her. I ran into her at Dulles Airport last week. Yeah.
We've all seen a version of her, but the truth is, so security was escorting her out, and it felt wrong to me, right? Because she came here to make a point. She was totally wild in the way she was making it, but I'm watching her walk out the door. She's at the back of the room now, and I said, this doesn't feel right, right? Because as I said earlier, you tell people they can't speak, that's when they scream. You tell people they can't scream, and she was screaming. That's when they're going to go tear something down. So I said, no, bring her back. We gave her the mic. I said, I promise. You ask your question, but I promise I get to answer it in return. She agrees to that. It turns out she's a pro-choice advocate, a my body, my choice person. I was going to the state legislature on Tuesday morning. I think she must have known that. Came to this event to protest my being there. But I give her the mic. She's just talking for 3, 4, 5 minutes. But by the end of it, it actually turns out, the story comes out that she's a single mother who did bring her daughter into the world. And the things she was saying were things like, my daughter is successful. I don't want you to look down on me. And I thought it was beautiful that the more she started talking, the more she started making our very point of why we believe in protecting life. And so I said, disagreements aside, you are a mother. We celebrate that. The audience applauded. It's why I love Iowans. Wow. She broke down in tears and left. And so I'm moved by what is possible in our country. Our country is broken. We are spiritually broken. We have a spiritual void in this country.
That's a good story.
It is our job to step up and fill that
story.
void by practicing what we preach as conservatives. And so I'm hoping we're doing that. I love doing that in Iowa. It's been something that's really lifted me up in a way that was never an experience I had as a CEO or in business. I've never had these experiences as we've had in the last few months. And honestly, as broken as our country is, it leaves me optimistic about where we're headed.
And you can listen to people. It's okay.
Yeah, it's okay. It's not going to hurt you.
Okay, so it's so interesting. So you, and I think the intro of you described some of it, but you're coming from a completely different world. It's not like you were mayor, state legislator. You're coming from business and technology and biotech. So what have you learned? How have your views changed since you immersed yourself in crowds of voters and started listening to people?
Yeah, so I think my views have changed in part by my belief that we're not as divided as they make it out to be. Right? Many CEOs in this country are frightened, right? Speaking their mind openly. It actually stops many of them will say, well, stops them from being donors to me, to maybe other causes. They're deathly scared because they believe that we're a nation at our breaking point. And in some ways, we are, because we let it get there. But one of the things I've been convinced of, I've changed my mind on, is that I don't think we're nearly as divided as we're taught to believe. But I went to the south side of Chicago. It's one of the places it's not really where the political advisors would tell you to go if you're in a Republican primary. I went to Kensington and downtown in the inner city of Pennsylvania, in Philadelphia. And I'll tell you, the people in those rooms, especially in the south side of Chicago, where they're converting South Shore High School into an encampment for migrants who they're spending $7,000 per person per month on, this is the supposedly far left, nearly entirely black, Democratic voting bloc. And I have never heard more eloquent cases for securing the border and actually prioritizing the interests of Americans than I heard in that room.
What did they say?
They said, what about us?
Yeah.
It was actually the right way to say that. And it came out in many ways where, look, we are Christians. We believe in treating these people humanely. But it's not right that they're spending $7,000 a month and getting baby formula when I couldn't find baby formula a year ago. I can't buy sneakers for my kids. They're providing sneakers for those kids. How does that work? How is that advancing my interest? And actually, you just reminded me of this. Many of them were asking me, as though I was on the side of it, of why on earth we're sending billions of dollars to Ukraine. So it was interesting to me that the traditional partisan boundaries as drawn are really sort of retrofitted. We're sort of shoehorning an old structure. We're sort of shoehorning the modern truth into sort of an antiquated view where I don't think the dividing line in our country is between Republicans and Democrats right now.
That's kind of been the entire game, though, the entire time. That's kind of been the game the entire time. Like I host a debate shit-talking room on a different app in the middle of the night sometimes when I edit and upload and stuff. So I talk to people from all over the world. And their typical thought on America is that we're super racist and that like nobody really gets along. And that's never been my experience in America. If you travel, go to a new city, go to a new place, meet new people that move into the neighborhood, regardless of their color or their background or their ethnicity or whatever. It's not like that in public. It's not like they portray on the news that we're such a divided nation. And I think he's right when he says that when they try to, act like it's 50-50 against an issue, I don't think it is. Like when polled, even on the abortion issue, I think the majority of Democrats don't believe in all abortion. They still want, you know, a 6-week or 8-week limit or whatever. So I don't think it's, he is correct there. We're not as divided as they say. They use it as a cudgel to keep us infighting so we don't look up at what they're doing.
I think it is between those of us who are pro-American, who believe in the ideals of this country, who will not apologize for those ideals, who will stand up and sacrifice for those ideals, and those of us who are, and it exists in this country, I mean, Vice President's a great embodiment of this, anti-American. Those who wish to apologize for a nation founded on our ideals. But if you divide it up that way, it is not 50-50 anymore. It's not even close. It's easily 80-20 in our favor, and half the 20 are people younger than me who never learned what those ideals were in the first place. We're going to bring them along too. And I think we have an opportunity to do in this country in 2024 what Ronald Reagan did in 1980, deliver a landslide election, call the bluff on the division. Much of it is artificial. I fell for it, right? Even when I started this campaign, running for Republican candidate for U.S. president, I don't even talk about Republicans that much anymore. I try not to use the word. Not because it's a bad word, but because it doesn't mean anything, right? If half the Republican, 3/4 of the Republican Party's got the same policy as Biden on the most important foreign policy matter of our time. You know, and if much of the Democratic Party, or at least people on the south side of Chicago, believe in using the military on the southern border and putting the interests of Americans first.
My name is Matt Lopez, and I'm rated one of the top criminal defense lawyers in Arizona for one reason and one reason only.
Good job, Matthew. We're proud of you, bro.
I'm not sure those labels are doing much for us now. And one of the things, I actually just got the stat yesterday from my campaign, 40% of the donors to our campaign are first-time ever donors to the Republican Party in any form ever. And the normal number is 2%. So I think this should actually give us hope for possibility. If we're willing to take the shackles off a little bit, relax a little bit on, identity can be confining. Right? The left does this masterfully. You're black, therefore you can't achieve something. You're a woman, therefore you can't achieve something. Identity is confining. You can be imprisoned in the identities that you inherit. And I just want to be careful that we learn from the left, or to learn including what not to do, to be confined and imprisoned by our own identity of what it means to be Republican. Let's just let that word go, and instead ask the question of what it actually means to be an American today. That's the question of our time. And you ask people my age that question, you get like a deer in the headlights response. It's like, it's a blank stare initially. But on the other side of that is then an introspection to say, okay, there are certain ideals that we fought a revolution for in this country. Self-governance over aristocracy, sovereignty as a nation, free speech, meritocracy, that you get ahead in this country not on the color of your skin, but on the content of your character and contributions. That's what it means to be an American. That's what we're running to. And honest to God, Tucker, I think that if we do this right, if we actually prioritize our vision, what we stand for, I think it's going to be a landslide election for I'm not going to say Republican candidate, a pro-American candidate in this race.
It's just interesting because what you didn't mention, so I asked you, you've been traveling around the country, it sounds like you've really, you went to Kensington on the south side, you've really kind of been to the span of the country. I watch media coverage and everything's about race. And America is divided by race. That's America's original sin. It's the thing that cleaves us as a country. You didn't mention that. So why do they keep telling me that?
They blow what I call woke smoke to deflect accountability for their own failure, actually.
Woke smoke.
So,
okay.
What do you think affirmative action has done for black people in this country? Nothing. What do you think? It's been negative. It's created racism that otherwise would not have existed. I've seen it. I've hired black executives at companies I have founded on merit. I could care less for the skin color. And then behind closed doors, people say, well, that person got their job because of race. Because they're jealous because they weren't good enough to get the job. But that is sad. It's unfair to everyone involved. They'll blow woke smoke. They'll say math is racist. When in fact, you know, what might be wrong is not teaching kids in the inner city for a year under COVID lockdowns how to do math. And then they're using this to cover up for that failure. I personally think that's actually what's going on in the U.S. military, too. Right? People wonder about where's this wokeness in the military coming from. I mean, our military has been disastrous in defining its purpose, how we're actually using the resources of the military to fight wars that we haven't actually shown great value from in the last 25 years. So let's just talk about systemic racism and white rage instead. It's a deflection mechanism. Companies do it. The military does it. Schools do it. Teachers' unions do it. It's irrelevant. In fact, what would they ever do without those poor black kids who they could hold out as the sacrificial lambs for their own failures? What we actually need to do is to level up and say, no, regardless of the color of your skin, how are we going to be a country that ensures opportunity, black, white, man, woman, doesn't matter? You know, my parents came to this country with almost no money. I've gone on to found multi-billion-dollar companies. And then people tell me, oh, that's because you had privilege. They tell me white privilege. It's sort of weird. It's sort of an interesting. It's kind of interesting.
Do you tell them?
I say, take the blindfold off, and now you have your answer. But the interesting answer is, actually what I do tell them, Tucker, is that I did have privilege. I didn't grow up in money, but I had two parents in the house, a mother and a father, with a focus on education and a faith in God. And you know what? That is the ultimate privilege. That if I'm going to enjoy that, every kid in this country ought to enjoy it too.
Do you think, I just have to ask you this, do you, because you're not a political professional, do you think Biden's going to be the nominee?
So it depends on who the Republican nominee is. I'm running because at this point, actually, my heart says, I couldn't have told you this in February. I launched on your show, and honest to God, when I left, I had no idea how this thing was going to go. My gut instinct is that I will be the nominee and in a position to win this in a landslide versus Biden. And they will not let Biden run against me. So I believe that if I am the nominee, they will not let Biden run. It is why they're holding in the back pocket the documents case against Biden. It is why they're holding in the back pocket everything else that you're wondering why they're not charging or bringing now. It's not a Democrat or Republican thing. It's a managerial class, deep state bureaucratic class versus elected official puppets thing. And so they're not going to have to use that if it's Trump because they think based on, they don't analyze, they analogize. They say we did it. We can debate that, but we appear to have done it. We appear to have done it, and so we'll do it again. So if it's Trump, they're going to run Biden. If it's me, there's no way they let Biden run. It's going to be a new puppet, Gavin Newsom, Michelle Obama, you name it. It doesn't matter to me, though, because for me, whoever it is, I'm not running against anybody in this primary field. And I'm going to keep that philosophy in the general. I'm not running against whichever puppet they put up, Biden or somebody else. I'm running for our vision of what it means to be a citizen of this nation, the United States of America. I'm leading us to something. And nobody else is going to get in the way.
Thank you. Vivek, good to see you.
Good to see you, Tucker. Thank you.
Interesting.
We have it, Vivek Ramaswamy.
So it was only 26 minutes.
An impressive performance, I think, from Vivek Ramaswamy. Look, he's really good at this. He's a good guest on shows. He's a good.
He is really good. He is really good. All right, so we watched a little bit of Candace's interview. We watched a little bit of Tucker's interview. What's his website? You can't even Google his website, dude? All right, Vivek2024.com.
We're in the middle of a national identity crisis. Faith, patriotism, and hard work have disappeared, only to be replaced by new secular religions like COVIDism, climatism, and gender ideology. We hunger to be part of something bigger than ourselves, yet we cannot even answer the question of what it means to be an American. Today, the woke left preys on that vacuum. They tell you that your race, your gender, and your sexual orientation govern who you are, what you can achieve, and what you're allowed to think. This is psychological slavery, and that has created a new culture of fear in our country that has completely replaced our culture of free speech in America. And that is why today I am announcing my run for President of the United States. This isn't just a political campaign. This is a cultural movement to create a new American dream for the next generation. To me, the American dream means you believe in merit, that you get ahead in this country not on the color of your skin, but on the content of your character and your contributions. It means you believe the people who we elect to run the government are the ones who actually run the government, not a federal bureaucracy that grows like a national cancer that is now metastasizing to the private sector. It means that the best ideas win instead of getting censored. It means you don't have to choose between speaking your mind freely and putting food on the dinner table. It means you believe these ideals form the backbone of the greatest nation on earth, that the rest of the world still looks up to as its example, not the Soviet Union in the last century and not communist China in this one either. That is the new American dream. Ask yourself if you believe in these ideals. I think most of you do. I think most of you believe your neighbors do too, though you can't be sure because you don't feel free to talk about it anymore. You might disagree with each other about corporate tax rates or about whether ivermectin treats COVID, but those are details. We still agree on our nation's most fundamental principles. At least most of us do. Yet the goal of the ruling party in this country is to convince us that we are divided. Why? So they can accumulate more power for themselves. Well, you know what? I have a dream that we can be one people again. We have obsessed so much over our diversity and our differences that we forgot all the ways we're really just the same as Americans, bound together by a common set of ideals that brought together a divided, diverse, headstrong group of people 250 years ago. And I believe deep in my bones that those ideals still exist, and I am running for president to revive them. E pluribus unum. From many, one. That is the dream that won the American Revolution. That is the dream that reunited us after the Civil War. That is the dream that won us 2 world wars and the Cold War. That is the dream that still gives hope to the free world today. And if we can revive that dream over fractious group identity, then nobody in the world, not a nation, not a corporation, not a virus, is going to defeat us. That is what American exceptionalism is all about. And that is what we will need to revive to save this great nation.
Okay. Not bad, not bad. So we've listened to a few things on him, and he's definitely got a few talking points that he's sticking with. He repeats over and over again, which is pretty typical of a politician. Ugh. All right. Revive American national identity. Unleash the American economy. Achieve a 5% GDP growth. Declare independence from communist China. Dismantle managerial bureaucracy. End weaponization of government and financial markets. Drill, frack, and burn coal. Abandon the climate cult, unshackle nuclear energy, put Americans back to work, incentivize trade schools, regulation cuts. Okay. Pardon me, folks. Hold the CCP accountable for COVID-19 using all financial levers. That's nice. And to me, what that means is we owe China, what, $2 trillion or something? We just wiped that out. Yeah, we don't owe you shit. Create another virus, motherfucker. We'll send you a bill next time. All right. As far as dismantling managerial bureaucracy, he wants to shut down toxic government agencies like the Department of Education, the FBI, the IRS, and more. Rebuild from scratch when required. End civil service protection for bureaucrats, 8-year term limits instead. Eliminate federal employee unions. Repeal JFK's executive order 10988. Move 75% of federal employees out of Washington, D.C. and end the pro-lazy remote work option. Cut wasteful expenditures. Ugh. All right. That's it, folks. I'm not going to keep streaming and yawning all over you folks. I'm not sure what the hell is wrong with me all of a sudden. I'm not even that tired. But apparently I am. Apparently my mind and my body do not agree. We were going to get into some other stuff. World Economic Forum member or not? Haven't had time to look. That's actually an interesting question, though. Vivek and the WEF. All right, enough is enough. GOP presidential candidate wants to sue the WEF for naming him the young global leader without consent. Okay, so that's kind of a yes and a no. So they did nominate him as the global leader, but apparently they didn't ask him if he wanted to be. Interesting. So, businessman turned presidential candidate Vivek Ramaswamy on Tuesday said he wants to sue the World Economic Forum for naming him a young global leader. Ramaswamy took to Twitter to express his dismay over the WEF's decision to impose that title on him despite explicitly saying no. A potential president candidate for the 2024 U.S. election said he fundamentally disagrees with the Geneva-based international non-governmental agenda. He added that the WEF, without his consent, named him a young global leader. He did a poll, should I sue? 90% said yes. It's time to hold them accountable for it. Ramaswamy, who self-labeled himself as one of the WEF's top critics, said he never gave them permission to use his photo on their website, told them he didn't want the title. Despite requesting them to take it down, the forum took no action. I could see why the world would want me to be affiliated with them, but I refuse to because I share a fundamentally different worldview. Well, you know what? Enough is enough. It turns out they do this to other successful young business leaders too. In a separate tweet, the potential presidential candidate posted a poll asking his 452,000 followers if he should take them to court. Okay. So to me, he's not on board. It is a little fishy. It's definitely a little fishy because they did recognize him. And we really only have his word saying that he didn't want to be recognized by them. So it is definitely a little fishy. I wonder if he actually sued. Did he say he was going to sue, or did he actually sue? The fuck? Fucking Microsoft. Fuck off. Where's my duck? Did Vivek sue WEF? Yeah, we got the poll. We got that he said he was going to. All right, he did file it in court in Cincinnati, Ohio on Wednesday, seeking only a nominal damage of $2,500. Okay. So it is legit. He did take it to actual court. Yeah, sabotage, exactly. Guilty by association without consent. But he did take it to court, which means he swore under oath that they didn't have his consent. So if they do have his consent, then he wouldn't sue because they would have some kind of document or some kind of email or some kind of notification. Yeah. If they would have had... Yeah, that's exactly it. If he didn't actually... Or if he had given them approval, they would have some type of proof of it, so we wouldn't be able to actually sue. He could talk about suing, he could run the poll about suing, but in order to actually file the lawsuit, I think we do have to believe him that he's not on board. So that's another plus for Vivek. That's another one-up winner for Vivek. I don't know. I kind of like the guy. Don't get me wrong. You can see my Trump shirt. I'm a Trump fan. I don't see any reason why, if Vivek is a great candidate, he wouldn't still be a great candidate when Trump is done. I haven't heard him say why he should be the candidate instead of Trump and not after. I do believe that people have the right to a choice. So if he's running to give people options, I can kind of see it. If he's running to put himself out there to get notice, so that way he can legitimately run again in 4 years, that makes sense. He says he's not a political strategist, yada, yada, yada. But you built multiple, $1 million, $1 billion companies. You're not a fucking retard. You do know how to strategize and think 10 steps ahead. So, I don't know. I'm still on the fence. I do like him. I do like everything that he says. Almost everything. Pretty much everything that he says, I do agree with. But you haven't told me why I shouldn't vote for Trump. You didn't tell me why not to vote for Trump. Because I haven't heard him say anything that Trump hasn't said. He doesn't want to get rid of any departments that Trump doesn't want to get rid of. It's just with him, he'd be an outsider coming into politics for the first time, just like Trump, which means he's not going to be able to stop being surrounded by backstabbers. He's not going to be able to maneuver the swamp because he didn't play around in it for 4 years. Trump's had the luxury of swimming through the swamp for 4 years, and now he knows it. So now he can take a wrecking ball to it. Yeah, exactly. Bones Mom in the comments says, trying not to be swooned by words that we can't say because they won't let us. So when we hear it, we get excited about it. She doesn't know. That's exactly it. He is out there speaking the stuff that people want to say. Well, I mean, I say, but I also don't make any money off of YouTube for saying it and barely got monetized. And so there are not incentives to speak the truth in the world today. That's for sure. I'm just an asshole, so I don't care. But not everybody has that philosophy. Although we should. Although we definitely should. Yeah, we definitely don't believe everything that Trump says. We don't like everything that Trump does. But Trump is a real one. And he's fighting for a real reason. And he gives a fuck. You can tell he gives a fuck. Everybody's like, oh, he's just doing it for himself and for his ego. He was on top of the world, people. Billions of dollars. Everybody loved him. The left loved him. The right loved him. Industry loved him. The workers loved him. Everybody loved him. He could have just rode that high horse, drinking martini. Well, he doesn't drink. Chilling on a beach, doing his thing, stacking cash, keeping the family name intact, the legacy going. No problems. He literally gave all that up to try to save the country. Hey, Bones Mama with the $5. We appreciate you. We appreciate you. You and people like you are what's going to keep us going making content. So we definitely appreciate it. We're trying to make this the new gig. I sold insurance for a long time in the corporate world, and I was fucking burnt out. So we sold the agency almost a year ago now. We're trying to make it from home, working from home, doing a bunch of side gigs, hustling while we build up this streaming thing. But ideally, we build up enough of you folks to hang out with every day, where you can support shopmcclures.com for products that you need made in America. That's a company that I'm creating as well to try to help out Americans who actually produce here and give them a platform to sell products. So shopmcclures.com if you want to help out there. Links, of course, are down in the description. Right after one donation is probably not the best time to sign off, because maybe that encourages other people to donate, which is what we hope and what we like. But I'm tired of yawning in your guys' face, and I feel another batch of yawns coming on. So we are going to wrap up today's stream there. I had another interesting gentleman I wanted to get into, not politically related, I guess more religiously related. Dr. Hugh Ross, I believe is his name, astrophysicist, who, after studying the Bible for a year and a half, came to know its truth. So I'm curious. I'm curious about this guy. I've seen an interesting... this was interesting. Anthony Weiner freaking out about the Hillary list. Was he freaking out because his name was on it? Oh, shit. Hold on. Open in new window. Let me see.